All right, all of you freedom loving boys and girls, welcome to Mission Critical Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Mark. Redbeard will be here a little bit later, maybe during part one or part two. He's got a new work schedule, so we're just kind of rolling with things, and we have a new format for how we're doing our videos. So I'm just going to jump right into it here tonight. If you are watching or listening to this podcast, now more than ever, see our previous episode. You got to go all in because you are the resistance, right? And we're going to start this off with our Fast and Furious, a little bit about current events. But the theme for tonight's podcast is, is there another shoe that's going to drop? In other words, is it going to get worse? Are we waiting for the other shoe to drop? And if so, what is that other shoe? We'll get to that in a second. I'm going to go right around our hosts or our co-hosts here for tonight. We got Blake and Patrick. And I'm just going to bring it right over to Blake. Now, Blake, here's what we'll do. And Patrick, you guys have been on. If you want to just do a quick little, remind everybody who you are, feel free. But then let's go into what is it in current events that's got you, either worked up, wound up, or something that you think everybody should be paying attention to. Let's come over here to Blake. You are first in the hopper here, sir.
Well, Mark, what really grinds my gears? No. On a serious note, though, is the kids aren't all right. That's one of the things I've been noticing a lot of recently, one of which is, I think it was and don't quote me on this, it was somewhere in Nevada. There was a young kid that stood up for a friend and had a mob of his peers at school beat him to death. I think it was 15 against him. And, before the show started rolling, me and Patrick were kind of chit-chatting a little bit while Mark was kind of figuring out some of the features on here about Heinlein and some of his work, and specifically Starship Troopers, and how he was talking about basically the government breaks down to such a point where it corrupts the family nucleus. And in the process, there isn't a rearing of these children in the right and proper way that a good civic nationalist, for a lack of better words, would be reared in. And, in his fictitious world of Starship Troopers, that what led to the Federation was basically the collapsing of the family unit, a revolving door for youths to be able to have a free pass for committing crime, tormenting individuals, getting away with violent acts that would, really be reprehensible in any sound society. And as much as it pains me to say, when you read the story about this kid standing up for his friend and getting kicked to death, it really kind of rings true with what Heinlein was talking about, so that's really kind of where my concern is at this current juncture, just per a conversation we had earlier, is there's a lot of lack of family and values anymore in this country. And it's really been laid bare with this youngest generation. So anyway, I guess that's kind of my little fast point I want to bring up. I believe you are muted, Mark.
That's because I wanted to make sure people could hear you and not me. Thank you.
No problem.
Hey, but that's a good Fast and Furious, good current event, because I don't even know how many media outlets are carrying that story because it doesn't fit the narrative, right? So I've got nothing to pick apart in your comment right there. Patrick, do you want to address it? I do like the Starship Troopers, the Heinlein emphasis, because, and again, we've mentioned Heinlein and Starship Troopers, not the bullshit. The movie sucks, right? Not that. Actually, some of the animated ones are pretty good, but the actual movie stinks. But the book is really good. Maybe I'll make another link to that. God dang it! What was
Sargon's video? Sargon's video. Yeah, I think he did that on the Thinkery, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I'll find that and I'll put that down here as well. But Patrick, let's come over to you because I've got no real rebuttal. There's a bunch of things I could add to it, but you want to add or refute what Blake just said, and then go into your whole little thing then too, sir.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's anything to refute, but I would say that I think that it's a symptom of a larger problem, and that larger problem is separating people in the United States, the divisive language, the culture that's being pushed on folks by either social media, which is a tool, and I think a lot of that's being influenced by foreign governments. We're watching what's going on right now with, Israel, Hamas, Palestine, and you got people that are coming out of the woodwork, standing up for Palestine, which, hey, sorry, it's not a country, not recognized by the UN and the rest of the world. But where were these folks on October, 5th and 6th, crying about genocide if that was really taking place? It's not. So it's a bunch of misinformation being fed by people with money, and that's all, you know, traced back to like nation states like Iran. So and people are falling for it. To me, that's the biggest thing that angers me, because it leads into so many things. All the stuff I think we're probably going to talk about later, but you know, hey, you know, your racism, sexism, like you can't utter a word without offending somebody. And I think that's like a big victory for our adversaries. But for us, you know, for the citizens of the United States, I think that that's something we need to like take stock in and do everything in our human power to identify, actually employ some critical thinking skills, and then try to bring people together. So I'll just stop there.
All right. Blake, you got anything to add to that?
Well, I mean, if I'm going to touch on it real quickly, it's to me, the whole Israel, Palestine, Hamas situation that we have going on is a symptom of the greater situation. It's another theater that's opening up and what's potentially boiling into global conflict. I mean, we can arguably say there are two very hot wars right now that are taking place. One is against a terrorist organization, but it is an urban war zone. No matter what you say, I mean, it's brutal fighting. And then we see what's going on over in Ukraine, tensions in other portions of the globe. We're seeing nations rallying together under interesting causes. You're seeing, if I remember correctly, I think the black flag was raised not long ago, calling for basically a holy war. And I mean, I think that's really what we're seeing kind of coming into the Middle East. So without being too crude, the whole world's a shit show right now. And I think that's kind of the whole, to your point of waiting for the other shoe to drop tonight, Mark, is where are we going and what's to be expected. So on top of all of these geopolitical tension flashpoints that we're seeing right now, we've also got, 1,000 earthquakes going on constantly over in Iceland right now. We've got all sorts of issues that at the very least you should be preparing for, because we never know what's around the corner. But man, it does seem like some interesting things are on the horizon.
Patrick, that really was no criticism or anything of what you just said. You want to add to any of that? I mean, I've got one point, or here, let me just make a point to the comments you're making. You were talking about, that some of this is due to the influence campaigns by foreign nations. And look, this has nothing to do with the whole Russian disinformation, all that bullshit. That's a media narrative. But on that same note, well, duh, and are obvious. Every country is out there running some type of PR campaign, whether they're doing that covert, overt, or clandestinely. It's still being done. That's in every nation's interest to do that, because nations work in their selfish interest, right? So we're no different from that. So, Patrick, I'm glad you just brought that up, because I just saw another stupid little stat, and this kind of goes into the 5-minute, the Fast and the Furious, intro here. 30-some% of Americans are getting their information from TikTok. Who owns TikTok? So I don't know. So again, I'm not necessarily arguing with you, but I think that's a great point. You want to maybe flesh it out just a tad bit more, because to your point, we may have lost. Yeah, we did. We lost Blake for just a second, and you're muted, Patrick. But just to your point, so I had to deal with hospital staff today, and I had to deal with VA staff the other day, and just the way and the nature in which adults are talking, and like, here's this person from the hospital staff who was like stressed out with the conversation, and I'm like, well, you haven't asked me a single question. You keep making statements. I mean, like, you just made a statement. I'm like, and then there's this weird pause, and then like I'm getting yelled at, like, well, you're hard to. I'm like, you haven't done it. Are you asking me a question, or are you telling me this is what I should do? I don't even know what you're doing. So there's this weird, I see you smiling. Yeah, there's this weird passive aggressive, even amongst the adults in our lives, and people who should be, accustomed and used to this. So you want to go on to that then? See what I'm saying? I'm not necessarily arguing with you.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Fleshed out a little bit more. Yep.
Yeah, this a big topic, and we could kind of go in a million different directions on it, right? But as far as this stuff goes, I mean, yeah, dividing a country is a strategy, right? And if you can do that remotely, sitting in some office space, and Russia, China, North Korea, without any harm to yourself, and all you do is sow dissent and discord amongst the U.S. population. Okay. it bothers me that people actually, just kind of like take this stuff without any context or without realizing like, hey, wait a minute, why would somebody say that? Simple question, why would somebody do that? But it goes a lot of different directions. And I see it. It seems to be, like tearing apart America as we go on. I mean, this latest thing that's happening. Israel, Hamas, and the all the protests and everything in the United States. That's just an example, but it's a pretty powerful example of what somebody can do with these media campaigns. And when you have people that don't question it, and sadly, it's college students, on a lot of these things that are supposed to be they're supposed to have critical thinking skills, like imprinted on them when they come out. It used to be one of the things that colleges were good at is critical thinkers and people that can argue and debate and look at things from different points of view. And we're not seeing that anymore. And that's the scary thing. But I think we can still reel this thing back at some point, and maybe we can kind of get to that at a little bit later.
Okay, well, okay, I think that's a good segue right there, because that could very well be, part of the question. What is the, we're waiting for the next shoe to drop, right? Or to fall, right?
Yep.
I think that's a part of it right there. As a matter of fact, I hope we do come back to it, because I would make that argument that with each passing day, more and more Americans are being conditioned and being, the most, whiny little, like
Yep.
can't solve a single freaking problem on their own, just like in everything is somebody else's fault. And I think it's all being done by purpose. And I'll save that for my 5 minutes. But we got Blackbeard in the house. Yes, otherwise known as what does that say? Apocalyptic middle management. Oh, nice. Yeah, all right. Hey, well, you know the deal, sir. We're doing our Fast and Furious. This is just whatever you want to talk about for 5 minutes. Current events, something you got going on, and then the main topic tonight is going to be waiting on that the other shoe to drop. So. You've kind of heard what these guys threw out. Blake brought out a bunch of stuff about youth today and about that kid who got beaten to death by a mob of 15 out in I think that was Arizona, if I'm not mistaken. Blake, was that Arizona? I think
I can't remember, honestly. Like, I hate to even admit it, and this is kind of a symptom of the times. Is it comes so quick that they become footnotes, and that's even painful to say, but that's really where we are. It's like, oh, was that this beating? Was it that shooting? Was it this absolute catastrophic event that would normally shock America for 2 weeks, but we don't give a shit anymore because they're every day? No.
And then on that, Patrick took it in a different, kind of following that same vein. Patrick was talking about how everybody in America through social media is being conditioned, and who's really doing that social media. And then one of the kind of not rebuttal, but addition to that was, I just saw a thing, the other day, 30-some% of Americans are getting their information from TikTok of all places. So that's where we are in our current events right now. Now let's bring it over to you. What do you got? That's you, Blackbeard.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you, buddy.
Okay.
And you're looking dapper, by the way.
I have my Fallout shades on, I would just say that it's kind of an interesting situation that we're in. And I'm a bit old for TikTok, to be honest with you, but I think TikTok is an appropriate name because the clock is ticking, And I think it's also fairly well known that that's Chinese spyware. And so for that reason alone, I'm also very uninterested in it. But I understand that it's very influential. And there's something that, and I think we mentioned this before, but it has to do with the re-engineering of people's brains in a very literal sense. Because, for example, if you watch an older film, say from the 30s, 40s, even the 50s, they have what are called technical events, which is anytime that a scene, that a shot, rather, not a scene, but a shot cuts from one particular shot to another shot. So it's like, you do a close-up of a boot, and then it's like a wide shot of the woman putting on the boot, and then it's like a close-up of her face, and before that you have a wide establishing shot, and you have like a medium, all these different things. And if you watch the older films, what you'll notice with those is that the time between the technical events, which would be like cutting the shot, it's far extended relative to what we have today, which is especially in like something like an action film, because it's meant to generate this sense of like anxiety in you. I don't really know what's happening, and cut here, cut, and then cut, and then cut, and then cut. And if you watch modern films, it'll be cut, 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 cut. And so it's constantly stimulus, 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 stimulus. And that is TikTok. It's that, but as social media and scrolling. And it's dopamine, 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 dopamine. And in a natural environment, when you come across something which is novel, that is to say, just something which is new, it takes a while to get there. Like you're walking through a field and then you come to a forest, technical event. You walk into the forest and then you move into like, I don't know, a mountainous region or something, technical event. Oh, you see a stream, technical event. But these are lengths of time in between. And what they have done is they've engineered our chemical responses to be, and that's so that we'll never remember and never focus on any one particular thing. I mean, on one level, it's like, well, I believe this, I really do think this, that there's a certain level at which, and if you talk to most people, they'll say, well, it's all about money. And I'm just telling you right now, it's not all about money. It certainly is not about money. I mean, that's part of it, but that's your apocalyptic middle management. What's really going on is they're trying to engineer society through government. Ment is mentality, and to govern the ment is to govern the mind. That's what that is. And it's not that necessarily the government is responsible for TikTok, although the Chinese government is responsible for TikTok. But it's the idea that the control of perception is the control of reality. And so what they've done is they've said, you know what, if we can't control the information in its entirety, we can at least limit people's like their focus, their attention span, and get it going. And if I don't have a stimulus, you get conditioned. If I don't have a stimulus within a matter of less than a second, well, I'm moving on to the next thing. And that's really good if you don't want people focusing their attention on that one particular thing. And I think that that's where we're at with that particular topic.
Well, so I think what you just said right there, I mean, that ties in very nicely with Patrick. Yeah, I see Patrick up there kind of smiling. I think that kind of, resonates with the whole point here. Patrick, you got any issue with that? Or, I mean, you want to add to that? That seems like that dovetails very nicely with the point.
Oh yeah, that's fantastic. And I've had these discussions with people for a long time. Being a little bit older, you look back when you were a kid, you used to go outside and play before all the video games even came up, right? So I don't know what the median age of the audience is, but you'd go outside and you'd play all day long. You played, sports, you'd play, army, whatever, you did like for hours in the day. And then your mom would have to like call you in for dinner at night. Like that's how engaged you were. And that was all in your own, in your own mind, your own creativity, to just keep things going, your own interpersonal skills with your friends and the neighborhood kids and whatnot. Right. So what Blackbeard was talking about is so spot on. Then you started fast forwarding to when, video games were created. Now, okay, hey, there's this cool thing. I'm going to sit inside and play a video game. And then we went from having 3 channels or 4 channels to like, 50 or 60 or more. And then it's like, you can kind of get lost in that. Well, now you're watching a program. The average program was somewhere in the neighborhood of like in a 30-minute program, there was about like 18 minutes of like real content. The rest was commercials. So you got into this, everybody got in the mode of like, hey, I'm going to pay attention for about 10 minutes and there's going to be a commercial break. All right, great. Fast forward to what we're at right now, what Blackbeard was just mentioning, people can't pay attention for like 3 seconds. So, I'm not too worried about what we might say that would bother somebody from this generation, because they're probably already tuned off because we've gone too long for their attention span would have been exhausted like at the intro. So, it's just insane. But now they've been conditioned to that. And it's a great point. And that allows behavioral psychologists who work for the social media companies to come in and say, what is going to make each one of these guys on this podcast, what are they interested in? Let's build up a psychological profile. What are they interested in? What are things that are like that? Then the algorithms take over from there, and then you're hooked. They just want to program you. So that's the ability to step away from screens. I think that's a step towards freedom. So, but it's an addiction. So you take a look, and I don't know what you guys are doing for Thanksgiving, but if you want to have some fun, take some phones away from some kids and some teenagers and watch what happens. It's literally like, someone on heroin saying you can't do that anymore. That they have to have something to get them through. They're just not capable anymore. And that's sad.
That's very sad. Also very intentional. And then, so I'm just going to add, because again, not planned. Everybody comes up with their own current event, whatever they want to talk about. Here, you're going to see exactly what mine is here. And I'm going to share some screens with everybody. And you'll get exactly, but this goes exactly to what Blackbeard and Patrick just said right there. All right. So first off, there, just a headline right there. Can anybody figure out why that would piss me off? And then here, you can all read it, right? He's going to, it's not a done deal yet, but it's already looking like, the fix is in and nothing's going to happen there. So let me just go to another one. And look, and somebody say, oh, that's Breitbart. What does that matter? I'm like, okay, really? That's how, and again, that kind of goes into how we actually even, like this right here. I won't consider this because this came from the Daily Wire. If somebody were to say that to me all of a sudden, like that wouldn't make any freaking sense whatsoever. Like, really? Because it's the Daily Wire? It's actually Joe Biden has given away a shit ton more money than that in and of itself. So on that note right there, kind of going to what Patrick, Blackbeard, and kind of to some extent Blake, you kind of started this, but we're so tuned into, like, as Blackbeard saying, the dopamine hits, the this, and then Patrick, to your point, who's really controlling that? Big government, whether China, our government, big business. But those headlines right there should, in and of themselves, have caused all kinds of, ripple effects throughout society, throughout our government, throughout media, both social media and mainstream media, journalist media. And yet no one will even remember those headlines before the weekend's over, and no one will even take it to heart that our president, to ask the question, why does this administration and the Obama administration, what is this love affair they have with Iran? Why do they keep giving Iran shit tons of money? Right? That's my first question right there, right? So the thing that's got me fired up in our fast and furious 5 minutes, like, why does this administration, which has its ties back to the Obama administration, and you can make an argument that this administration really is nothing more than a proxy administration for Obama in his third, unelected term. Why do they have this love affair, this affinity with giving money to Iran and giving Iran getting breaks? And how is it, and again, and then my final point were those articles. If I would have done anywhere near what Joe Biden did, in my previous life, and I'll kind of turn over to Patrick, he has a very similar experience as me. Dude, you can't handle classified documents that way. And the only person in this whole, if you want to call it, conversation was the former president. He's the only one who has the ability to change, how he's going to, classifications or declassify something. He can do that on a whim. He had that power as the president. I never had that, and neither does the vice president. And it doesn't matter if I was a GS-14 and he was the vice president. Neither of us had that capability. Yet if I would have done what Biden did, and to that matter, what's his face? The Trump's former VP is Pence as well. And how many other politicians? And why are there no politicians pissed off and jumping up on their desk? Where are the quote unquote Republicans? Where are all the liberals, right? So that's what I leave you with, because I think it kind of goes into Patrick and Blackbeard. A little bit of, we're just being conditioned to not care, to not pay attention, and to whoever made the point. And we're only 20 some minutes into it, and we've probably already lost half of the people or we never got them because it wasn't sexy enough. There wasn't flashing lights or explosions or bikini snaps or something like that, right? All right, does anybody want to pick apart my little articles or add to it? And then, because I think, we got Redbeard in the house. I'm going to bring him on here too. I guess he made it in time. So, but as we're doing that, anybody want to tackle what I just said there and add to it, or call me an idiot, or take it in the direction they want to go? Otherwise, because once we give you guys get a chance to respond to me, then we're going to come over to Redbeard, and then we're going to get into the the gist of it for this
Well,
episode, part one.
I'd like to jump in on this real quick because I think this is kind of the bigger part of, waiting for the other shoe to drop again. I keep using the term of what we're talking about tonight. These are all just different tools in the toolbox, different weapons. War's somewhat changed. It's not kinetic yet. We've touched on this before. The dopamine hits. I mean, theater is as old as time. It was, bread and games in the Roman times. It was just the general harlots and actresses of old back in Babylon. It's as old as time. I mean, even from the rituals on Delphi, this is how masses are controlled. The difference is now is we've perfected it to such a fine-tuned scale where we can individually tailor it, kind of like Patrick was talking about, for what your search profiles are, what your consumption profiles are, what interests you have, how long did you hold your eyes upon an image on TikTok. This is a very fine, intimate understanding of the individual. So we've taken these dopamine hits to a direct science, to the point where we can both give them the dopamine when we want, and we can cut it off when we want. Of course, I'm speaking of the royal we, this government of just absolute manipulation tactics. And we can see it anywhere from what's happening overseas in the battlefields to what's happening around the family tables with the breaking down of the families, like we were talking about earlier as well. So really, more than anything, I just want to touch on is it's a different set of tools for a different type of war. We are in a modern age where every single person's a combatant. I mean, the UN themselves came out about 4 years ago and said it's their desire to make every human on Earth a human's weapons platform. Well, what the hell does that mean? I mean, we're all part of this grand psyop that's going on. We're all part of this grand situation. So, I mean, everybody in essence is potentially weaponizable to some capacity. So. Oh, and hi, Redbeard. What's up, bud?
Hi. Also,
Sorry,
yeah, Mark, you're muted.
Yeah, I got it now. But I got to remember to unmute myself too. But as you were talking, Blake, so I saw Blackbeard in the background. He was, giving a very enthusiastic thumbs up. So here's what I'm kind of thinking, fellas. Let's let Redbeard come in with, if he's got. Well, actually, no. Before we bring Redbeard in, let's let Blackbeard, because I know he's got a comment and a response to where you were going, Blake. Let's let Blackbeard come in, make his comment. Then we'll go over to Redbeard, get his, current events, Fast and Furious, whoever he wants to talk about. And then because I already see what you just brought up, Blake, I think that goes right into waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? I think that's part of what do we mean by the shoe is going to drop? Well, it means what's coming next, right? Well, I think we already just kind of stumbled onto it, all of us in this conversation here. Well, we already see how we're being set up for what's coming next.
It's an unsustainable system. That's where we are. They cannot continue carrying itself on. Parts are going to start breaking off.
Well, or it's designed to fail, or to
Bingo.
bring us to that point. That could be the other possibility. But let's go to Blackbeard. I know he's got something to add there. Again, it's awesome because I can kind of see you guys sometimes, and Blackbeard was like, yes, make sure you know. So, all right, let's bring it over to Blackbeard here. It's all you, sir.
So in terms of systemic integrity, it is inevitable that a complex system will break down, and the more complex a system becomes, the more fragile it becomes. You introduce the fragility in the complexity as you scale, and we're living at a scale which is not conducive to human flourishing. And if you want to look, for example, at the initial structure of the United States government, it was essentially treated in such a way that the individual states acted and operated as individual countries that were federated together. And then it was through the Commerce Clause, which was expanded for probably empirical purposes, that the whole thing became kind of a municipal corporate, like expansive, I don't know, just a massive system, and it's built and it's built and it's built. And the reason that it's built is because of the money system. And as he very rightly stated, that, and I said this before, but I think it's worth repeating, it's that the power, well, all power comes from mind control. So he talked about psyops, psychological operations, and that's fundamentally all the power that you can have, because, for example, our monetary system is completely fraudulent. The whole thing is created fictitiously through the creation of debt. And that's why, for example, people are like, well, the United States is like one of the biggest debtors in the world, if not the biggest debtor in the world. But you have to understand that when money is debt, which it's really not money, it's currency, but I don't want to go into that debate. But when money is debt, whosoever has the greatest amount of debt has the most money. That's how this system works. And it's a confidence game, and it's based on the full faith and credit. So that's your confidence right there. So the danger and the reason, one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons for the implementation of such severe propaganda tactics and psychological operations is to maintain that faith, so that you maintain the power in the fraud. And if you there's a professor at Michigan State University, Dr. Mark Skidmore. Catherine Austin Fitz has interviewed him many times. They seem to have some kind of professional relationship, but he talked about the fact that there's so you look at the national debt, there's over 20 trillion, not million, not billion, trillion dollars, at least, unaccounted for by the Department of Defense. And
Oh no, I'm just I was agreeing with you. No,
Well, I still will say, just like right before 9/11.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly right.
Which means there has to be a big distraction coming up soon.
That's exactly right.
We are seeing in the concept of things.
Yes.
So.
Yep. He's exactly right. I don't have anything to add to that. That's exactly right.
Well, but it's a great path that you've taken us on. But let's kind of bring it over to Redbeard. Okay, if you want to just jump right in, or if you want to go back and just give us your whatever your current event 5-minute Fast and Furious is. But you can already see where we're going for waiting on the other shoe to drop. I mean, we're kind of dancing around it, but everything that has been brought up by Patrick, Blake, Blackbeard, to some extent myself, you're kind of new to the party here, but you're already seeing some of the things that we're going to kind of argue for, like what's happening and where we're going here. So, Redbeard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah, late to the party. It's been a heck of a day, but I'm going to kind of start off with something that I saw like a day or two ago, and I thought it made a lot of sense. It's something that I feel like I've kind of always known, but it's along the lines of, when government starts passing laws that break other laws, maybe it's time to admit that we're being governed by criminals. In the end of the day, like, what is the supreme law of the land? It's the Constitution. We don't even have people that have a tendency to adhere with any sense of permanence or with any sense of principle to the Constitution. Now, that's not to say that you don't have people that utilize the Constitution in order to justify the means to whatever it is that they're doing. We absolutely do. But this is something that is part of that shoe that drops, right? Because in the end of the day, when you totally ignore or you exploit for whatever reason possible the supreme law of the land in order to create an end that's befitting of something that you want, you can justify it and say, well, we made this into law, and we understand that it doesn't technically line up, but we think by going back and assuming that we know what we believe they said, then it justifies it in some roundabout way. So in the end of the day, like, the shoe hasn't only dropped, it's been dropped for a long time, and it's gone through generations of people that just kind of turned their mind off to it. And I've said numerous times that, like, we are the sentinels to defend our republic, and that's against illegitimate, unconstitutional wars. That's against things like the Federal Reserve and the usurping of our actual our gold-backed currency that we used to have. That's against certain things that people misconstrue, like the supremacy clause. A lot of people will use the supremacy clause to justify putting their boot on the neck of their neighbor because, oh, well, if it says that the federal government's supreme in all cases. This is part of that boot again. Like, we only need to understand our founding documents as it pertains not only to domestic issues, but foreign issues, and how that's going to ripple with time in order to understand what went wrong, where it went wrong, and how we can fix it. But we just have to, it's like being part of a 12-step program. We have to first admit that we have a problem, identify truthfully that we have a problem. A lot of people will say, yeah, we have a problem, but we have a problem because the other side said it, or we have a problem because this person said it, or we have a problem solely because of this person. We have a problem because we don't have a Speaker of the House. Okay, well, last time I checked, the country doesn't stop running because we don't have a Speaker of the House. It's all of these little things that they're going to use to amalgamate some type of usurpation as time goes on in order to justify whatever it is they want to do to us. And they're never going to limit the amount of power that they get, and they're never going to stop themselves. It befalls us to be able to right those wrongs. And unfortunately, we creep up to that first step in the 12-step program, and then we fall off like a junkie because we're so addicted to abuse and usurpation that if we don't get it with these little treats that they provide of comfort, temporary comfort, then we think we're going to go insane. So I don't know what you want to call it, but we need a serious intervention. So I'll leave it at that. You're muted, Mark.
Thanks, guys, keeping me on track there. I'm going to bring this over to the group, but just a quick comment on that, Jeremy. So you missed the very beginning, but everybody had made a comment. Started with I think it started with Patrick, or may have been with Blake, but then it went over to Blackbeard. But it was the comment was really the same. It was all about these dopamine hits. It was all about social media. It was all about this conditioning. Because somehow we brought up TV, and I did some articles. So I think what you said dovetails into that nicely, and I think that's a great segue into let's just go right into it, guys. Waiting for the other shoe to drop. And matter of fact, we just did Redbeard. Let's just go right over there with Patrick, and then we'll go to Blake, and then we'll go to Blackbeard and bring it around. So, Patrick, right on. I'm picking up what you're putting down. So I think that ties in what you're saying or what you're about to go into. I think that ties in neatly with our fast and furious 5 minutes here at the beginning, and then what Redbeard just said. So, Patrick, do you want to chime in and just, because right, isn't that about the next shoe that's going to drop?
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of like giving some historical context into what we're seeing today, right? So this is a quote from a guy named Yuri Bezmenov, and he was a KGB senior leader back in the 50s and 60s. Well, he came over, and this is what he talked about in terms of the active measures program. So for those who aren't familiar with it, here's his quote. So it says, "Fighting war on a battlefield is the most stupid and primitive way of fighting a war. The highest art of warfare is not to fight at all, but to subvert anything of value in your enemy's country, be it moral traditions, religion, respect to your authority and leaders, cultural traditions, or anything. Put white against black, old against young, wealthy against poor, and so on. Doesn't matter, as long as it disturbs society, as long as it cuts the moral fiber of a nation's, as long as it cuts the moral fiber of a nation, it's good. And you just take the country when everything is subverted, when the country is disoriented and confused, when it is demoralized and destabilized, then the crisis will come." That was a quote from the 50s. So if you take, or 50s or 60s. So if you take a look on a historical timeline, my thinking, and I'll put it out to you guys too, is hey, when did you see America at its strongest, right? So if I had to go back historically, I'd say probably we really showed something. They call it the greatest generation for a reason. The folks from World War II. Well, after World War II ended, that's when these ideas started, bubbling in the heads of the Russians, and they said, "Hey, let's start."
Did we lose them, guys?
Yeah, He's not popping through on my side.
Well, he must have said he said the forbidden words. Yeah, he said
Oh no thing.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I think he was making.
No, okay. But Blake, I think we can all chime in. Like, I loved how he went to Bezmenov, and actually, whoever speaks next.
Well,
I'm going to go and pull a link for Bezmenov, because if people at this point in time don't know who Yuri Bezmenov is, I mean, you're way behind the power curve here. So,
well, you should
Blake,
absolutely. Yeah, I was gonna say Yuri's a fascinating character, and he really did predict quite well what has now come to pass. It's also very similar to what Orwell was talking about in his book 1984 that everybody loves to talk about, but it seems like nobody's actually read. So it's we've been subverted. It's a weapon, but I think what I really want to touch on was what Patrick was talking about right before he got cut off, is when was that greatest generation? When was the last time America truly was what it had the potential to be? And I think, for me, it comes back to about 1915 on the global stage, 1918, if my date's correct on that, is the creation of the Federal Reserve and the Corporation of the United States. And it was the changing of everything. It was when we went from, you could keep that money that was in your pocket. What the minimum wage, if I remember correct, around that time period was $1.25 in silver quarters, which would equate to about, like $22.75, or I don't know what spot price is today, but it was a legitimate living wage. A man's labor was the monetary value, not the monetary value itself, not the currency, as Blackbeard was talking about before. It was, what are you capable of producing? And that's the most powerful thing there is. Well, when the Federal Reserve came out, obviously, we started becoming an indebted society. We did not pay off. As Thomas Jefferson said, one of the greatest sins, and I'm going to butcher this quote, but one of the greatest sins is to pass down the debts of your generation to the next generation. You're supposed to leave a clean slate so that we can continue to build forward. This was also the same around time period where we stopped building great architectural structures. And I've talked a lot about this with Mark in private, but legacy infrastructure, and I think I might have touched on this possibly in the last podcast as well, as our forefathers, our ancestors, they left this great legacy that if we were just to take the rust off and paint the bridge, it would be around for 250, 300, 400, 500 years. But we are so lazy now as a society because, again, on the nuclear side, our families are breaking down, but the societal side, our communities are breaking down, that we're not willing to take care of that infrastructure because we have no stake in it anymore, because there's no money to be made, because everybody's a debt slave to Babylonian money magic. I mean, this is really that other shoe to drop, in my opinion. And we're seeing it through things like we were talking about with the different weapons platforms that are being utilized in this non-kinetic war that we're taking place in right now. So anyway, without kind of just having this word shotgun, there's a lot going on. I think that's the other shoe to drop. And it's a hell of a ride. It's a hell of a ride. So Mark, you're
muted, Mark.
I keep thinking I'm hitting that button. I'm going to have to get a little bit better at it. Well, because I'm sure everybody on your guys' layout, there's two ways to unmute it. And I'm trying to use the big, faster, easier one, and that actually is the one I keep messing up. So, but hey, but Blackbeard, you were doing some thumbs up there. I think let's come over to you. You got obviously something to add into that, and just for everybody watching and listening, you can kind of see where we're going. We're still talking about is everyone waiting for the next shoe to drop? You can already hear from our conversation so far that well, I don't want to speak for everyone else, but it seems kind of clear to me that most people who are here right now believe that there's still something else that's going to happen. There's still another shoe to drop, right? So now let's come over to you there, Blackbeard.
Well, Blake is exactly right. Like I really think he gets it, and I've not met him before, but I really think that he understands what's going on. Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So it is a thing. Like there was a switch. It's so, I don't believe that the core of what's happening is fundamentally monetary. But it is a huge driving factor. It's one of the primary driving factors of what is happening. And it isn't so that people can get wealthy. They're already wealthy. It's about creating the kind of world that they want, because remember that they create the money supply. And so when he talked about like the living wage, for example, well, you had an asset-based monetary system at that point. But then in an event in 1971 that was called the Nixon shock, we went to completely free floating currencies. There had already been perturbations in the system utilizing gold as an asset backing the monetary system, which incidentally comes from the Greek goddess Moneta, but that's kind of a different divergence. But all that to say, so in 71, silver was removed at that point, and so it became completely free floating, and all of the world came under this one unified monetary system. Almost. There are a few countries which are dominated by the Islamic religion, which are currently under attack. You mentioned Iran before. Iran was a westernized country until, no offense, Mark, but the CIA ran an op that installed the current leadership. And,
what? The CIA did bad stuff?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, but these countries that come under attack are generally the ones that are not under the universal monetary system, which is that free floating. And now they want to move. Yes, that's exactly right.
Yep.
See, okay. So, but, and so they're getting ready to move us into the next phase of their desired monetary system. I don't know that they're going to get it, but that's what they want. And in the establishment of the monetary system that we had before, as he mentioned, when it was asset-backed, there's a whole legal component to that where it meant that you had like true ownership of things because it was based on, again, the ownership of a real asset. But what they did is they inverted it, they flipped it, and they made money from an asset and they turned it into a debt. Which is, they flip the side of the balance sheet. You have your you have your cash, statement of cash flows, you have your income statement, you have your assets, and you have your liabilities. And they turned money essentially into a liability, depending on who's issuing the currency. But the point is, they can issue any amount of currency they want, and it's done. So a lot of people don't realize, and it's a significant thing to understand, and it's pertinent, and it's an important thing, because no one is better than their incentives. And most of us get up and we do our servile jobs, or we run our businesses or whatever it may be, because we need money, and we need money because we need to eat. Well, to his point about the minimum wage and what it was when it was in that asset, because it's because you can't, the above ground supply of silver is fairly constant in terms of its generation on an annual basis, and that's also true of gold. And gold's is lesser than silver's, and that's why gold carries a premium relative to silver. Now, the way our monetary system works is that if I go into a bank and I take out a loan, I'm not like borrowing money that was pre-existent on the balance sheet of that bank. The bank is creating the money on the spot from my pledge, from my promise to pay. That's why it's called a promissory note in law. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm just telling you this. And so that creates something that economists call the money multiplier effect. But it essentially means that our currency is what they call an elastic currency.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is that, well, like an elastic band, you can pull it out and stretch it, and then you release it and it contracts. You get this inherent volatility in the monetary supply. And that is really, in my opinion, the fundamental source of the business cycle. And the business cycle is not a fundamentally bad thing. People don't like it because it means we have to go through periods where life is more difficult. And that even happened under the asset-based monetary system. So I'm not saying that it didn't, but what I am saying is that with the ability, what we've done is we have ceded the competency and the power of the mechanisms of the market to a handful of people through the advent of this system that was created at Jekyll Island. And as he mentioned, it was 1913, but I mean, whatever, you know what I'm saying. But what we've done is, yeah, whatever, you get it, like very obviously you get it. But so and so what we've said is, rather than saying, that the rational forces, because that's also this is such a deep topic, really. And especially, no offense, but especially what Blake has brought up is such a deep topic, because these issues are like fundamental and core in terms of like there's a scripture in the Old Testament says if the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do? Well, what are the foundations? Well, the foundations are the foundational principles, and one of those principles is the idea that justice matters, that truth is objective and exists outside of ourselves, that a system of just weights and measures is better than a system of unjust weights and measures, that there's a moral standard by which to judge that which justice is, and that it's immutable and it's eternal, and we should strive to meet it even if we can't. And so what we did is we said, the hell with that. We'll just create money from nothing. We'll base it on a lie, and then we'll expand it, and everyone will think that they're getting rich when really what they're doing is through the manifestation of debt, through this act of will. It's really a spiritual thing. We'll draw value and power from the future into the present and rob future generations of that wealth. And it says in the Old Testament, and I agree with it, that a righteous man leaves an inheritance for his grandchildren. And in adulterating the monetary system, we've created a structuralized system of perverted incentives, and no one is better than their incentives. We all operate on them. And that's the idea of like why we're going to doing our jobs and doing these things. And so it's a matter of what we value in our heart. We desire it, we think about it, we desire it, and then we act on it. And so we're in a position now where the complexity and the deceptiveness of the system that we were frankly born into, and I'm not passing the buck, no pun intended on this, but we're reaching a point where the complexity and the fragility is so extreme that the managers of this system that don't really worry about money, but worry about power, vision, and in my opinion, occulted religion to which they adhere, they understand that this whole thing is coming down. They know that it's coming down, and that's the shoe that's going to drop. And what they want to make sure is that the decline is managed so that in the rubble that remains, they will be able to construct the world that they have desired according to the principles that they hold in their heart, which are largely contrary to the principles that I do, certainly. And I will be so bold as to say that I think that probably the lot of us hold in our hearts.
So, all right. So we've got the other shoe that's about to drop, and I think Blackbeard just did a great job of bringing into a systemic level, argument about what is transpiring. Again, just take a look around you at all the other things that are taking place. I mean, Blackbeard and Blake, and it all started right there, and it just went down that road of, and maybe that's a little esoteric, but. How is it not? I mean, just look. I mean, like, because before you just finished Blackbeard, that's where my brain was going. It's like, dude, this is all an engineered decline. Like, they need this actually to fall apart, right? Because there's too much of a burden. There's too much. It's too onerous. I mean, look, just to bring in another, waiting for the next shoe to drop comment. I didn't bring this up in my the headlines, from some of the articles I've just seen over the last couple of days, but people are already starting to talk about VIIRS and how many deaths have actually taken place. So again, with the latest unpleasantness with we wanted to destroy your economy and label you a threat to society and force you to stay at home, but now we realize now that everybody's woken up and it wasn't like that, now we want civility. Well, you guys weren't asking for civility back then. So even though that's slightly different, I think that plays into what Blackbeard and Blake were just saying, and then bringing that all the way back over to Patrick. I mean, these are the active measures. These, in my opinion, and then I'll shut up. I think these, and it's multifaceted. It isn't just one thing. It isn't just economics. It's economics. It's civility. It's discourse. It's all these other shoes. So it's really not just the next shoe. It's just will all of these small shoes come falling down at the same time? So it feels like we're just getting curb stomped. So,
well, I think that. Can I say one quick thing? Real quick? So I think that's the whole point of that saying, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's the steady march of the soldier. It's the steady march of the boot coming down. When one shoe drops, the next foot picks up and goes to drop again. And we've gone through many shoe droppings. It's just now we're coming to a culmination point where that grand shoe, if you will, or the society is too complex and it starts to collapse. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say there.
No, I think that's right. I mean, and that's what I'm trying to get. We've been saying this, in previous podcasts and in previous conversations. All of us talk, as just friends, on the phone. But it's a death of 1,000 paper cuts. I mean, this has been going on and on and on for, if you really just kind of take it back, you really can bring it back into, kind of like about that Bush Jr., the 9/11 timeframe, and then up until now, if you look at, with the exception of one presidential cycle, we've been on, as Blake just said, it's been a series of small shoes dropping that just keep breaking.
And on the global scale, even more than that. I mean, this goes back before the time of Adam Weishaupt. This goes back before the time of really just Babylon in general. I mean, this has been something that has been going on for thousands of years. It's just now technology has made it evidently clear for anybody that is willing to deductively reason. Oh.
Now, Patrick, you started us on this, and Blackbeard's giving a big thumbs up to Blake there. But you kind of started us on this with the whole Bezmanoff, and actually, I don't know if we had a technical issue, but I will have a link for, if you're not familiar with Yuri Bezmenov, I'll have a link. You can find him. He was a defector, which actually, from a spy perspective, it makes me, you always have a little bit of doubt, right? But I never ran him. Was he a defector? Had he been an asset, an agent? Had he been providing intel? So, there's things from the intelligence perspective. You always hear people say, oh, well, that person's just a traitor. How can you trust them? Well, do you really, I mean, by that logic, you really can't trust anybody then, right? So what the hell are we even doing in this, this game? But Patrick, you kind of see where I'm going with that, but I don't know. You started this with active measures and Bezmanoff. Do you want to, now that Blake and Blackbeard have added to it, was that going in the direction you were thinking of taking it, or is when you think of the next shoe that's about to drop, do you think it's something different?
Well, and I missed a lot of what was said. Interesting timing how my Wi-Fi dropped out. It's been working all day, but kind of getting into all these different things, right? Historically, like how many empires have lasted for eons? None, right? So at some point, something's going to fail, and it's starting to get that eerie feeling like, hey, this is on some kind of a path to end the United States as we know it, and maybe morph it into something else. On the like non-apocalyptic view, I think that this is something that now we literally have to fight all divisiveness. So if the average listener out there, or anybody for that matter, is listening in, and you hear this talk, it's not fear mongering. It's not just to kind of echo everything that's going on in the news. I think the goal should be to, hey, look, what can we do? And I honestly think if we start bringing people together, encourage long form, communication, not the 2 second, flash on your screen, actually get to know people, embrace people that have different ideas. I mean, that's what America is. I think we can all make a step to getting back to that. But if you and I disagree, I don't have to, pull out a hatchet and, now all of a sudden you're my mortal enemy. I think that ideology feeds right into what Bezmanoff said and, the whole active measures program. It's now to this point where we are doing exactly what, they set out to do all those years ago. So if we can bring this stuff together, encourage, people to speak freely, and not control things. If you hear the phrase like, oh, you shouldn't say that should anger you at your core if you're an American. So hey, you don't have to agree with what I say. You might find it morally reprehensible, what have you, but hey, I've got the right to say it. And coming from military background, I know Mark, you had a significant time in the military. I did too. Time at the agency, all this stuff is to fight for people's right to say these things and to have these thoughts. But when you get government entities and educational institutions trying to put the clamp down, that just it rubs you the wrong way. And I think we need to do everything in our power to stand up and like bring people together and allow people to say what they want to say. That's pretty much it.
I couldn't
Well,
agree more.
that's a great kind of statement right there. And I know I speak for, I mean, I feel confident I speak for pretty much everyone. I mean, that's the intent of the podcast. You know, even when Redbeard and I started this, 30 some episodes ago, I mean, we were like, hey, there's these issues, we want to talk about them. But at the end of the day, it can't just be, as you just said, Dane, this isn't clickbait. This isn't fear porn, doom porn. I mean, it's like, hey, these are real issues, but we should be able to talk about them. But more importantly, give people solutions, try to be solution based. So I think on that note, and then as we're going forward, when we're doing this, for everybody watching or listening, we know that, some of our previous podcasts have been pretty long winded because this is all something that we take very seriously. Everyone who's been on any one of our podcasts has been a serious individual, believes in the country, believes in freedoms, believes in everything, and that Patrick just said, and that we all should be able to have these conversations, and we're all adults, and you have every right through our constitutional republic to make these statements. So we want to foster that, and yeah, we've gone a little long in the tooth sometimes. So again, just going to that, just knowing all the way back to the very beginning, where people just, we've got this limited, attention span. Well, in this case, though, it's also because people have jobs, right? And it's tough to listen to a 4-hour podcast. I'm not going to lie. That took me over 2 days. When I was sitting here cutting materials for my job, making gear, I had that on a bunch of different times, and it took over 2 days to listen to it. So, that's not something that everybody can do. So on that note, we're already at an hour. Redbeard came a little bit late to the party because he's a working man, and and he had to work his butt off. So I think Redbeard, we're just going to do this, and if everybody else is okay, before we go to Redbeard, if anyone's got one final little comment about the shoe dropping, right? Because I think we've all pretty much said that it's going to be multiple shoes, but shoes are still going to drop. I think we go ahead, follow our new format. We'll let Redbeard take us out. Everybody then takes a break. We'll do part 2, and then we'll come back for part 2, which will air a few days after part 1 airs. But part 2 will be focused on, well, what can we do? I think we can start part 1 instead of doing the current events again, or part 2. We just start with a refresher. Okay, what are the bad things that we think are going to happen? And then the meat of part 2 is, well, then how do we fix it? What can we do as people to remedy to this and to make it where, even if we don't get out of this, we at least get out of it alive, and we mitigate, the pain as much as we possibly can. I mean, what do you fellas think about that? Does that sound like a good way to go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to that point, as far as mitigating the pain and making it out alive, we always will. I mean, and that's the thing. What it is it's a time of rebirth. We have an opportunity ahead of us. We have a fork in the road.
Mhm.
We can either try to build something better and leave something better for the next generation, or we can succumb to the abyss, and we can be like so many cultures before us. So this is really a trying moment. This is really a do or die moment. And I think Pat hit it on the head. We can't be doom and gloom. We can't feed into the abyss. What we have to do is we have to start looking forward. What can we do on a community level? What can we do in a family level? And how can we try to fix on the larger scale what it is? We don't know what it is around tomorrow, but I can damn well tell you that I'm going to have my family as prepared as possible. So
I just want to throw one thing in there, though, too. I mean, I know we want to be positive, and I didn't take this way, but that's because, I know Blake and I know what he's saying, but I just want to clarify this. Look, we're not going to sit here and just blow sunshine up your ass and say it's all like, rainbows, Skittles, and unicorns.
no, it sucks, man.
No, we've got to be brutally honest about the horrors and the evil that's walking this earth right now, right? And I had a little gift that I was going to bring up a meme. It didn't quite work out with the formatting, but and it's basically, it was a meme. A couple of weeks after I've been saying evil's walking around, not even trying to hide. And basically the meme was evil's out there, and it's making its own clothes, and it was the devil sewing, but it goes to this point. We still got to be honest and speak truth to words. And the truth is, to use a line from a movie, there's something wrong going on right now. There's something horribly wrong going on right now. So the other shoe is about to drop. I don't think we've seen the bottom of that. But again, let's save that for part 2 intro. Then we'll go into solutions. Anybody else got anything to add? Otherwise, we're going to go to Redbeard and for the outro. Anybody want to add anything?
Nope.
All right, there we go. So that's 60 some minutes right there. Not bad, guys. First time really trying. Redbeard, you got to talk a little bit more in this next one. You were so quiet this time.
Yeah. Well, I'm just warming up to you guys. Tonight it was a long day, dude. Like it was. I came home and the first thing I freaking did, I was just like, I don't even feel right walking in my own house. I had to go take a shower. Almost just went in with the clothes on. It was that bad. So
this might be one of those too much information moments.
Hey, look, I'm just saying, like, it's one of those things to where, like, you come in from outside and you just, like, the first thing I felt was like, it's like all the blood, like, went back into my body. It's like I was numb, the entire day. And it's like, I'm sure you've all felt this way, like when you come in from a cold day and you feel your body thaw. And it's like, that's how it was for me today. It was just like autopilot. I'm running on 4.5 hours of sleep. I got done with like an 11-hour day. Like, I'm kind of over it. So I was just soaking it all up. And I have something that I'll probably start with on the second part. So
okay. All right. Well, then last chance, anyone? Any last little comments? Otherwise, we'll go. Jeremy will do our outro. Then we'll take a little bit break. I'll send everybody a link for part 2, and then we'll do that. We'll come back in, and I think we already know where we're going for part 2. Yeah. So
I'd say just don't despair. Don't despair. Don't despair. Because this is kind of one of those situations that it's easy to succumb. It's easy to despair with seeing what's going on, and just hold on to the light. Hold on to the fact that we are still, at the end of the day, we try to be the beacon on the hill.
Yeah.
Well, in the face of evil and adversity and overwhelming odds, I don't recall any historical lessons where despair has won the day.
None. No, in fact, usually that crushes you.
Pretty much, yeah. So you're absolutely right. All right, Redbeard, why don't you go ahead and take us out then, and then then just take us out, and we'll kind of come back here in a couple more minutes for part 2. But take us out, sir.
Well, so everybody knows they know how this goes, right? Like, look, in the end of the day, the flame of liberty shall not and will not ever be extinguished so long as there are good people that are willing to support and defend it. And as Mark has always said, you are all the resistance. You're all, in this. We are all in this together. And it's something that I feel like so many people over time have a tendency to feel isolated, alienated. They don't know who to talk to. They don't know where to look. And so, like, we have to, like, pull together. And I like what Patrick said, which was, look, it's this is one of those things, man, to where, like, we got to put some things aside and we got to look after each other. So on that note, that's all I got. And that'll take us out here. So.
All right. Thanks to everybody for watching or listening to tonight's podcast. Thanks to, part of the crew that showed up here for tonight. I'll just throw this out there. I just got to throw him under the bus a little bit of, not housekeeping, but David couldn't make it tonight because not only did his kids just crush it in football, but now he just transitioned them immediately into, what was it, basketball? Who was here when he sent me the text? Somebody, wasn't it Patrick? Weren't you on with me? And what is he doing now? Now his kids are playing some other freaking sport.
New sports to crush. Yeah, he's doing. His kids are doing awesome. Yeah.
Yep. So anyway, all right. But so everybody watching and listening. So this ends part 1. We're gonna take a little break, and then we're gonna shoot part 2, which will probably air about 3 days after part 1. So everybody, thank you very much for listening. Thank you everybody to our guests for joining in. Guests, please stay tuned for a second, and then everybody else be good. Thank you much. We'll see you again soon.